lying bastard!
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Deborah, student, singer, songwriter, and everything else in between. Hi, how y'all doing? Welcome back. Okay, today we're gonna be talking about the Shadow and Bone series. I have read the first book, which I actually have the physical copy, and let me tell you, if I actively invest the money to get a physical copy of the book, you know I'm invested. I'm invested, period. I asked you guys a long time ago what series you guys would like to see, and you guys talked about Shadow and Bone, and honestly, I love Shadow and Bone, the series, but unfortunately, it's been canceled by Netflix. Exactly. I read a lot of articles saying that it was canceled because, I don't know, the budget would not equal the amount of profits made, but it's also one of Netflix's most popular shows. Like, make it make sense. You know what I mean? I really feel like we were robbed of a good YA series, not gonna lie. And personally, I would like to say it right now, my love for Ben Barnes is unmatched. I've loved him since the Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, and I will still forever love him, so don't fucking play with me, okay? A few things before we start. First of all, when I researched the Shadow and Bone series, there's actually like, I think 8 to 10 books. That's a lot of books. So as a result, I decided it would be smarter for me to combine 2 books each per video, 2 to 3 books, depending on what my mood is and how much time I have. So which means that this video will probably be a longer video because I want to cover the Shadow and Bone book and Siege and Storm, and maybe the 3rd book. The way the series is divided is that it is divided into the grisha-verse, it is divided into the stories about the crows, and then there's like other general stories happening. So if you're looking for like crow content, you know what I mean, the 6 of Crows, the Kaz and Inej, that's not gonna be fully in this video as of now, but that will definitely come in the part 2. So this might be like a part 1, part 2, part 3 series. I think this is gonna be ass to edit, but it's okay, we do it for the culture, period. Okay, as a result, I will probably have to film this video over a matter of days. So if I come to you in different outfits, that's how you gonna take me. That's how you gonna take me, period. Third thing is that my lighting is not the same as last time because the other one broke. Please excuse the lighting. I'm so sorry about that. So yeah, grab your dinner, grab your popcorn, get your stuff ready, start doing your laundry. I don't know what y'all be doing, but do it, okay? But if you don't know who I am, hi, my name is Deborah, student, singer, songwriter, and everything else in between. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about my favorite TV shows, my favorite books, my favorite films, and today I will be giving you an unhinged recap of Shadow and Bone, the series. So without further ado, let's get into it, and that's on that, period. So the book starts off with our main character, Alina. I'll put it on the screen, but basically where we start off in this book can see everything that's happening in this map right now. And where we're starting off is in this little town called Kibrisk, close to this place called The Fold. I'll explain all of that in just a second. Just give me time to land, okay? So in this little town of Kibrisk, our main girlie, our star girl, our main character, Alina, and her best friend, Mal, exist, basically. Well, both of them have been best friends since childhood, and they both grew up in an orphanage. So for now, the both of them don't know who their parents are. All they've known is that for some reason, they ended up in an orphanage and they both had each other. And they've just been besties ever since, like, period. You know what I'm saying? And so on this particular day, the both of them are on this journey, on this ship, which it's not officially called a ship. It's called something else in this world. It's called a skiff, which is very interesting. And I think it's something that we'll see a little bit in the books that Miss what's her name, child? Miss Leigh Bardugo, ma'am, I'm so sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. In this series, she also uses a lot of Dutch words, which I recognize as someone who speaks Dutch, so that made me laugh. But yeah, the ships are called skiffs. Alina's really good at drawing, and so she's speaking to a bunch of cartographers because all of them and all the people together that are in this little like tent area in Kibrisk are planning to cross the Fold. The Fold is this place right in between the town of Kibrisk and Novo-Kibrisk, due to a particular person who is a Grisha, technically, who has a specific name, but for some reason it's gone out of my head right now. I'm so sorry. Due to this person with magical powers, this person has created something over this sea called the Fold, in which basically this area in which would normally just get transferred on a skiff has now been overshadowed in complete darkness. And in this complete darkness, there are these creatures called Volcra. I should have had a photo of it on my wall, but personally, I don't want that kind of demonic energy in my house. So y'all are gonna get it on screen. Thank you very much. I don't want to wake up and see that in the morning. Thank you. And so the Volcra are these creatures that fly and practically feed on the human beings that cross in the skiff on the other way to the other side. The Volcra are not easily defeatable because first of all, you're in the fucking dark. Second of all, you can't really move because they're very sensitive to sound, although they are technically blind. So these evil creatures, when you're crossing the Fold, make it extremely difficult to cross the Fold. Therefore, everybody else in Key Brisk or wherever you are have to properly gather like materials, maps, light and everything to just make sure that they cross the Fold safely. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to cross the Fold, and a lot of people end up dying. So this is something that causes a lot of anxiety for our star girl, Miss Alina, because she is now like, oh my God, I could possibly die during this whole entire experience. And Mal is also trying to calm her down, but I feel like the both of them naturally do have anxiety about it because it's a very big deal. Now, of course, because Mal and Alina are both orphans, they don't really have that many options to get like proper jobs. So this is kind of the best that they can do. And they are not Grisha. In this sort of world of Shadow and Bone, there seems to be just normal human beings, people who do things normally in society. So like soldiers and everyday townspeople, everyday human beings. And then there's Grisha. So Grisha are people who have magical power. Well, they don't have magical powers. Let me not say that. They are able to manipulate elements around them. So like water and fire. And they basically have these powers that need to be, of course, trained and harnessed in a way. And what they say that they do, that training, that harnessing of their energy, that harnessing of their talent is called the small science. Now, the Grisha are, by the normal people in this country, not very looked well upon. I mean, the normal people consider them witches and wizards and warlocks, and actually to them quite evil. That's the consensus within the towns. The Grisha have existed for a long time. Now, this isn't fully explained in the book, but this is also due to show knowledge and me doing a little bit of research. Thanks to the Fold, Grisha now became super useful in society versus when they were shunned before. And when the king realized that he did not simply have the powers to beat the Fold and to get people safely across the Fold, they needed Grisha. Now, Grisha would be able to sort of subdue the effects in the Fold and somehow find ways to try and temporarily defeat the Volcra, because without the Grisha, like, the human beings would not be able to do it, plain and simple. And they need to transport things from one town to the other. And so as a result, the king has now ensured that the Grisha would not be properly trained in an effort to one day finally destroy the Fold. To be able to destroy the Fold, the prophecy that is apparently given is that there needs to be a sun summoner to defeat the darkness, because of course the Fold is the darkness, you know what I'm saying? So they've been looking for a sun summoner in the meantime. In the meantime, we have the Darkling, but I'll get to him in a little bit. But it's the Darkling that, you know, gathers all the Grisha together, make sure that they're getting trained in order to not only just build themselves up as Grisha, but eventually to destroy the Fold. And so what they do is that the Grisha, who are in different categories that I'll get to in a minute, they go to like orphanages or other people's homes and look for like little kids who have the Grisha talent. And so they test them. And so they are constantly looking for them, not only just for new Grisha, but also for the Sun Summoner eventually. It seems like it. Although right now the Sun Summoner is a myth at the beginning of this book, but we'll get into that a little bit later. In the beginning of this book, Alina actually gets a little bit of a flashback between her and Mal living in an orphanage where Grisha come to visit them. And you can see in this scene that when the Grisha come to visit them, there's 3 different types of Grisha, and the different types of Grisha are separated by their something known as their kafta, which is like their jackets or their like relief or heavy coats that puts them in different categories to which they belong, which is determined by their Grisha talent. We're kind of seeing things from Alina's point of view. In this scene, she remembers that everyone says that Grisha are witches, but at the same time, the country needs them, so it's very an interesting juxtaposition. And she and Mal hide from on the Grisha instead of getting tested like every other kid does, which means that the Grisha could have found Alina from a very young age, but because her and Mal hid, they never found them. Now, in the current scene, they are preparing to cross this horrible fault. Now, it's clear in this scene that two things are very important. First of all, Alina doesn't really think much of herself. Girlie doesn't really see herself as that girl, but she is that girl, but she doesn't see herself as that girl just yet. You know what I'm saying? Period. And Mal is her bestie, but Mal is a handsome looking man. Also, Mal does not look like this in the books. Mal is actually like blonde haired and blue eyed, but I don't know, Archie Reynolds kind of gave, he ate with that role. You know what I'm saying? I like this version of Mal more than the book version. Either way, tomato. Mal is a handsome man in these streets. You know what I'm saying? And he is very flirtatious. He is flirting with every girl around the corner. You know what I'm saying? He belongs to the streets. In my personal opinion, during this era, Mal was for the streets. It was really giving community property. It was really giving LLC, because he was just everywhere. And my girl Alina was crushing over him. In fact, she's actually had a crush on him for a while. She just feels like he doesn't really find her attractive, or he doesn't really see her that way. And this kind of gets confirmed a little bit later, but in the show, it's kind of a different vibe. It's kind of like implied that they kind of did have chemistry from the beginning, but in the books, and this would be my further criticism for the both of them, the romance wasn't really there at the beginning, not gonna lie. It wasn't giving romance. It was kind of giving, I like this guy and this guy doesn't see me at all. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't personally know how I feel about that, because for me personally, I love a good golden retriever. I love a good man who's been in love with me since day one. You know what I'm saying? But you know what? That's not the story. So let me not say that. But anyways, eventually they all get on the skiff, despite Alina's intuition being like, I don't know about that. And then when they get on the skiff and they cross the fold, everything's kind of okay for like 5 seconds. And then things go bad very, very quickly. Everyone is like deathly still / quiet as they're trying to cross the fold, because again, the Volcra are very, very sensitive to sound, but they're also kind of blind because everything's in darkness, you know. As everything's kind of going okay, all of a sudden they hear, I think it's the flap of one of the Volcra's wings, and that kind of sound causes just sort of a domino effect, and all of a sudden everything's in fucking chaos, bitch. The next thing you know, the Volcra, they're eating people alive, they're destroying people, they're tearing them apart. I'm like, wait a damn minute, hold on. Another person that she's friends with literally gets like yanked from her, which is horrifying. If that happened to me, the way I would be screaming, nah, y'all can't. It's a fucking bloodbath. Alina's like fucking panicking because like, what are you supposed to do? And so she's just looking for her bestie Mal. And so she sees that Mal is being attacked. So she tries to like stab one of the Volcra with like one of her like small knives. But bitch, what's that gonna do? And so in this sort of like weird, like desperate attempt to try and save Mal, she like jumps in front of him. You know what I mean? And then the Volcra is like about to eat her alive as well. But then surprise, the Volcra like uses its claw to like tear out her back, and then shaboom shabam, light just erupts out of nowhere, and it causes everyone to go blind, and then she faints, and so we just move on to the next chapter. So what technically happened is that when Alina like got scratched, there was just like a huge surge of light that came out of her, because surprise, she is the sun summoner. Just a great thing to know. And at this time, Alina had no idea this was possible. No one knew this was possible. So at the end of this, whatever came out of her, like the surge of light, literally blinded everyone, including the damn Volcra. Immediately, Alina is taken to the camp of the Grisha, okay? Basically, she's taken to the head Grisha, my main man, the Darkling. But everyone at the same time, it's just because for a long time, the idea of the summoner hasn't really existed. So everyone's a bit suspicious. She's immediately interrogated because everyone's like, okay, but how did we not know? Because we send people to find Grisha all the time. So bitch, how do we not know? And Alina is confusioso because she's like, hey, what the hell just happened to me? She's also just trying to find Mal, and no one tells her where Mal is. No one, which is very, very unsettling for her, which honestly, same. Like if I get dragged from somebody I fucking know and then I have someone like this in front of my face, yeah, I'm gonna be pissed too. But it's clear the Darkling recognizes that she is the sun summoner. But there is one person who's not really happy about this, and that is our girl Zoya. Her name's Zoya, and she comes back in this book a little bit, but right now I'm not gonna lie to y'all, Zoya's a hater, and she's gonna be a hater for the rest of this book. But Zoya's like Sun summoner? Nah, that girl's a fake. Zoya really said gaslight, girl boss, gatekeep. She was like, where's the evidence? Did you see it? And so it's clear that Zoya's energy is very, very much antagonistic. You do find out a little bit later that the reason Zoya is very antagonistic about this is because she's just jealous. The sun summoner is not going to take so much of the darkling's attention, and she don't like that, even though they've literally never seen anything like this before, and the sun summoner till this point has been a myth. It's a little bit scary for Alina because these are just people that she doesn't know. There was a survivor in the skiff, and that person gets interrogated as to what they saw, because even Alina doesn't really remember it like that, but that person got to see it, and he was like, no, she shot out light, she is the babe, she is the star girl, she is the sun summoner, Periana. So the darkling listens to this, and he's like, yeah, okay, pack it up, we're going to the palace, period, girl. So my girl Alina gets a little bit of a palace makeover. She gets taken over to the palace, and she has a little bit of a Cinderella moment, not gonna lie. But before we get into Alina's makeover, let's talk about the different types of Grisha that they are so that you guys can understand.
Think you the shit, bitch? You not even the fuck.
So in the beginning, you actually get like a sort of, not a ranking, but like a sort of understanding of how the categories work.
Hi everyone, okay, editing Deborah here. So the last video, I didn't really explain it well, so I'm going to quickly explain it well here. You have the three categories: the corporality, the ethereality, and the materiality, right? So the corporality people are the soldiers. They're practically the most like high rank Grisha. I think they mostly wear red. If you're a corporality, you get to sit on the higher side of the table, Periana, you know what I'm saying? The talents of the corporality are heartrenders and healers. So the people who can slow your heart, practically kill you, and the people who can bring you back to life. So they're extremely, extremely valuable. The next people are the ethereality, which technically the Darkling and Alina also fall under. So the ethereality, literally, like, they use what is around them. They use elements, so this includes the Inferni, which are the people who can, like, they can't summon fire, but they can use the elements around them to make fire. That's why it's called the small science, because there's like science behind it, I guess, and it's not just like magical power, because as a Grisha you can't really create matter, so you use what's around you. Inferni, they literally summon combustible gases to make fire, which is wild, but sure, whatever. You also have the tide makers. Tide makers can use the temperature to literally summon water. Squallers can raise or lower air temperature to create storms. So they practically just work with the weather and the elements around them, which is pretty cool. And then the lowest ranking are materialkai, which are like durasts and alchemy. So the durasts deal with solid materials, so like think steel, cloth, like actual, you know, actual matter. And the alchemy make like little bombs, they make like, you know, like things you would do with alchemy practically. But they're the lowest ranking Grisha, and I think the ethereality wear blue and gold, which is what Alina chooses to wear, and the materiality wear purple. So yeah, I hope you guys understand that. Okay, back to the show, bye.
Anyways, so Alina gets taken to the palace, and everything, like her whole life turns upside down. Everyone's kind of looking at her different because now they're like, oh my gosh, she's a sun summoner, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. You know what I'm saying? She doesn't realize that everyone's been kind of waiting for this sort of savior, this sort of person that's gonna save the realm. She just cannot believe it. She cannot believe it. She doesn't really see herself as much, which is kind of sad, because sometimes I really want to be like, girl, stand up. But at the same time, I understand that she grew up in an orphanage and not really with that much parental guidance or understanding or someone to validate her and her feelings. So I completely understand where she's coming from. But like at the same time, girl, stand up. Stand up. You deserve so much better, please. And she's very, of course, intimidated by this guy. This guy, she's watched him as they're like traveling in their like little carriage. At one point, they get attacked, I think from Fjerdan soldiers, which I don't fully understand the whole point of Fjerda right now, but I do know that Fjerda fucking hates the Grisha. They really hate them. And so they're trying to constantly kill Grisha like all the time, as if they don't have the same pull to fucking go over. But I digress. So they get attacked by Fjerdan soldiers, and this guy like cuts through them. He slices them up like they're nothing. That's fucking terrifying. But it's kind of hot for her, I think. The whole idea of like this powerful man has now taken this interest in me, and that's something that's gonna come up a little bit later. So she gets taken to the palace, and my girl is introduced to a warm bed. She's introduced to luxury. She's introduced to good food, and my girl said, hold up, wait a damn minute, this is good treatment. Not only is she introduced to this better way of life, but she's also introduced to like the Grisha. But it becomes very apparent very quickly that my girl does not know how to fight. And that is why I put up this photo of her trying to fight, because honestly, girl, same. I don't know how to fight either. So she's also vigorously trained. But the focus is that Alina meets our girl, Jenya Piriana. I love Jenya. I think she's so beautiful. I mean, that's kind of her whole thing, TBH. But she kind of just is very like the fashion girly within the palace. You know what I mean? And she's a healer at the same time. Like she can heal your scars. But she's also, I think, a fabricator. She does makeup. Girlie's a multi-talented babe. Period. Alina and Jenya eventually do become friends. And so Jenya introduces her to like a lot of the things in the palace, like what happens, what doesn't happen. And then there's the issue of the kefta, in which Alina's gonna wear, because now that she's the sun summoner, which like category does she belong to? Where if you notice, the Darkling only wears black, like he's his own category. he's not amongst the commoners, whereas everybody else wears different colors. But now everyone's like, okay, but where does she technically belong to? Originally she chooses the blue color, which I think is that of the etherealki. I think she belongs to that order, so she originally does wear blue and gold, but we'll get into that a little bit later because it kind of changes. So she gets like her kefta, and everything's just super new to Alina. At the same time, because everything's super new to her, she misses Mal, of course, because it's a lot to process and everyone's just putting this much pressure on her, and it's just a lot. So she like writes letters to Mal, but she notices that these letters are not really being returned. Now, let's get over a few details. While she had gotten transported to the Grand Palace, she had tried to speak to the Dark, and then she like tries to have a conversation with him and relate with him in different ways. But it's clear that first of all, everyone in the grisha-verse, right, is intimidated and scared of the Darkling. But Alina's a bold babe, kind of. So she tries to speak to him, and then she finds out that I think he's 120 years old.
Wait a minute, hold up!
But, you know, she's very, like, still kind of attracted. Well, should I say attracted to him? But she's kind of, like, intrigued by his whole entire aura. Because if you look at it technically, she is the light to the darkness. So they're kind of polar opposites. And so as a result, they're kind of, it's a magnetism. You know what I'm saying? And so she like tries to prompt him from questions, but when he's not in the mood to answer, he will not answer. Also important to note that when the Grisha do start arguing about where Alina belongs, he's like, no, she will walk with me. And everyone's like, oh. So it becomes very clear that first of all, the Grisha, because of their like harnessing of their powers, the powers that they harness allows them to age slower, which is why he's 120 years old. Mind you, he's also a person who's very obsessed with power. He's very obsessed with getting these things called amplifiers. And amplifiers are these objects that amplify, literally like make bigger, make better the Grisha's power. You know what I'm saying? So he's very, very, very obsessed with finding amplifiers left, right, and center. Now there's normal amplifiers for the average Grisha, and then there's amplifiers for people like him and Alina who have so much power. And one of the amplifiers is like a stag, this great white stag that technically the original story is he needs them because Alina needs her power to be amplified so that when they both cross the fold, they could both destroy the fold together, which I always found a little suspicioso, because why would someone who represents dark power go into darkness and need light for it to end? Wouldn't you just send the person who has the light to defeat the fold? Why would also the person who literally represents something that's dark train you to get rid of darkness? Make it make sense. But yeah, no one can really question him because everyone's kind of fucking terrified of him. So I understand. You know? Okay. You get to meet Marie and Nadia. This is Marie, this is Nadia. And so they kind of become pseudo friends to Alina as well. But they're friends in the sense of like they're very aloof as to what's kind of happening. And they're just really surprised that the Sun Summoner is there. Every time something's happening, Alina just sends letters to Mal. But again, she's not really getting a response from him. And this starts to secretly worry her because she just wants to have somebody that she really is close to and trusts, which is totally valid. But Mal is not responding, or so she thinks. In the meantime, Alina is getting trained, well, should I say trained or getting physically beaten down by her trainer. Basically, he trains her like physically to, you know, build some muscle, know how to fight, you know what I'm saying? So that she doesn't just like prop up and then die accidentally if someone hits her, you know what I mean? Like Alina is also getting trained by none other than our icon, Baghra. we find out she is the Darkling's mother. She, just like the Darkling, wears black, and she's kind of not the nicest to people either. Kind of like her son, she's got a very strict demeanor, and she kind of just like hits Alina on the hand a lot of the time, and she calls her foolish girl. Not the best, but anyways, she trains Alina to be able to develop her power. Definitely Alina struggles with that because she has a lot of insecurities to get through, and so as a result, Baghra constantly pushes her for that, right? So in the early stages when she is being trained by Baghra, and Baghra's like, you're literally doing nothing, you're just making small circles, sweetie, if you want to get rid of the fold, you're gonna have to try harder. And it becomes clear that Alina's facing a lot of pressure to like just outperform everybody so that they can get rid of this fold, which isn't really fair to her as a person, and it's a lot of pressure to have to be under, because don't forget, at the end of the day, this is the king's palace. They definitely do have to present Alina to the royal family so that they can, you know, show like, oh, we found the sun summoner, this is amazing. And so the Darkling is not only training her, changing her life, but now he has to kind of show her off as this kind of show pony, TBH. So they have like this little show off in which the Darkling and her have to go in front of the king and queen. It's this very special moment, right? The Grisha are surrounding them, and so everyone's waiting to see Alina's power in person because they just heard the rumors. And so the Darkling like opens up her arm kind of, which is also pretty weird, and it's also crazy to have light shining out of you like that. That's fucking terrifying. But anyways, in this little show, you know, the light shines and everyone's like, oh my god, she's the sun summoner Piriana, and everyone's very happy, and they're like, oh my god, she's come to save the day. Two things are happening, right? So she's being trained. Her life is being turned upside down. She's now the sun summoner. At the same time, it seems that there's a sort of should I call it a romance? Well, I don't really want to call it romance because Alina is very young. It's kind of weird. You know what I mean? For me personally. But the Darkling and her are getting to know one another. And again, they feel a lot of tension. Well, she feels a lot of tension with him. I don't want to say he doesn't feel anything from her because we don't know his POV. However, at the same time, personally, I cannot help but feel sometimes that because of that age difference, he's not really interested in Alina like that. He's just kind of interested in her because she has this power. And if she was an everyday person, would he really pay attention to her like that? We don't know. That's the thing. That's the question that everyone's asking. Does he really like Alina? Or is it just because of the circumstances that put them together, basically? I'm of the opinion that he doesn't really love her, and we'll see why in a few minutes. So they're getting to know each other, and she's getting to know more and more and understanding the Darkling's, like, you know, mentality and what he wants. Eventually, after a sort of party that they have at the palace, they do end up, like, making out. You know, which is very new for Alina because at the same time, girly really does suffer from low self-esteem. Again, I don't judge her for it. You know, I just wish that she, you know, viewed herself as more. And I think somehow the Darkling like picks up on this low key. This isn't really implied in the book, but this is my interpretation of it. And so she's very much in this vulnerable position as well, where she's this most wanted thing. And it seems that this man is going out of his way to protect her. But I think what she's not realizing is that he's going to protect her because it protects his interests. And Genya now comments on this at some point, and she asks Alina to be careful because powerful men have a very, very big hold on especially young, vulnerable women, which brings into question the idea of the age gap, naivete, and youth. And Genya just asks her to be careful because at some point, you know, she's kind of getting a little bit not carried away, but she's kind of going through limerence with the Darkling. You know, she's kind of like, this guy's interested in me and he's giving me his kefta because he wanted her to wear the black kefta to show like, right, like she's with the Darkling. They're together. They're like a couple kind of thing. Not that they're dating, but it's like, you know, that kind of alignment with him, if that makes sense. And she's like, wow, like this guy's interested in me and, you know, we're slowly getting to know each other. And she just has that like young trust. The Darkling is also kind of going back and forth with her. But with Genya's warning, right, comes something very, very disturbing. I don't even know how to approach this. Should I say trigger warning? I don't think I'm allowed to say this fully on YouTube, but Genya slowly alludes, right? Not says it in outright words, but Genya has been sort of like given as a gift to the king and queen because not only is she beautiful, but she's a healer and she's good with clothes and makeup and all that kind of stuff, right? And the queen obviously hates her because she's pretty, but not only that, the Darkling has sort of trafficked Jenya or pimped out Jenya to the king. The king like sort of assaults, because I can't say like sleeps with Jenya willingly. That would imply that it's consensual. But Jenya's kind of in the situation where she kind of has no choice because of the Darkling. She says that the king has his way with all the servants. Ew, disgusting. But she says that because he has his way with all the servants, at least she gets, diamonds and gifts out of it. I don't even know how to react to it because it's very disgusting. And Alina's also very disturbed by this revelation. And so as a result, like what the queen does is, instead of facing her husband, the fact that he's a fucking disgusting human being trash bag, she instead takes her anger out on Jenya, and she sort of makes it seem as if Jenya like is happy to be here, and she's happy to be going through that because she's getting gifts, which is so fucked up. And Alina's very disturbed by this because she's like, ew. But remember, this is all officiated by the Darkling. The Darkling does not find it hard to sacrifice somebody's bodily integrity, someone's life, for his own eventual gain. So this is also a concern to Alina, and it should be a glaring walking red flag to Alina that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the kind of person that she should be around. But it's kind of also difficult for Alina because she's getting pulled in by this man, and she's in the situation where she's just surrounded by so many people. So it's also kind of hard for her to like fully understand and grasp what's going on. And she's also kind of, is she really in love with the Darkling, or she's just so infatuated? It's really disturbing. Also, one thing, on the bright side that is important to mention here is that Jenya, while going through this, unfortunately, and again, because her beauty is kind of like a powerful source for her, but at the same time, it's not, because it also makes her a victim. At the same time, she has a thing for David. And the reason that she has a thing for David is not only because he's a very like scrawny scientist guy who's very focused on his books, but also because he's not obsessed with Jenya for her beauty, but they actively have conversations, and she likes him. She definitely likes him, but David's very shy. But anyways, that's besides the point. So Alina, she's not fully understanding like what her purpose is or how this came to be. But while Alina is like in the library of the Grand Palace, she gets met by the apparat, which again, the author of this book uses a lot of Dutch words. Like on page 215, she uses the word verloren, says in quote, "What chance did I have of making it to the fold on my own? And if I did, to make it to West Rafka and onto the verloren." In Dutch, if there's any Dutch people watching my channel, you know that verloren means to be lost or something that is lost. But anyways, so yeah, this apparat or the apparat tells her that she should see him as a spiritual advisor. He's kind of creepy low-key sometimes because he kind of follows her throughout the whole entire library and she's just trying to avoid him. But he tells her not to be creeped out, but to see him as a sort of spiritual advisor and not to be intimidated or scared. And so he gives her this book which talks about the saints. Now the thing is that he tells her that, of course, a saint is different from a grisha. A saint is someone like the sun summoner, right? That people actively sort of praise, because we find out later in the book that people actually prayed for the sun summoner to come, and they always pray for the sun summoner to do well. So she's considered a saint, but to her, she's like, I'm sorry, that's not the job description I signed up for. Unfortunately for her, that's not really how the world is seeing her / portraying her, which is very sad. But he gives her this book and he says that like Grisha do not suffer in the same way that saints do. And she doesn't really understand this, but I feel like this is a theme that comes back a little bit later when it comes to the term of sacrifice, but we'll get to that a little bit later. The book just continues throughout her days of training, her writing letters to Mal, her going through the throne room and being trained and being beaten down constantly, but finally getting to a point where maybe she's getting better, her interactions with the Darkling, and just her life in the little palace. Until one night, right, when Alina's just trying to live her life, do her daily duties, Baghra pulls her to the side and she tells her, "You need to leave right now." And Alina is fucking confused because she's like, "What do you mean I need to leave right now? What are you trying to say?" So it turns out the Darkling is practically on the heels of finding the stag. And Baghra, because of course she's his mother, she is fucking freaked out. She quickly tries to explain to Alina while giving her like a fur coat and like a bag full of coins so that she can escape very well. It turns out that the Darkling doesn't really care about destroying the fold. Think about it. And let me explain. So Remember I said that there was a person who was responsible for creating the fold, Black Heretic? I forgot that earlier, but the person who created the fold was called the Black Heretic, right? The Darkling had said that the Black Heretic was his grandfather, or at some point in the books, when Alina and the Darkling were talking to one another, he says that the Black Heretic was his grandfather, when he also tells her his age. Baghra finally tells Alina that the Black Heretic was not the Darkling's grandfather, but the Black Heretic is the Darkling. It's just the fact that he's so fucking old that some people don't even remember anymore. And Alina's flabbergasted by this because she's like, huh? But truthfully, it does kind of make sense. Alina finds this so hard to believe because she's like, no, he's been so gentle and he's been so kind to me and we've been really getting to know one another and he kissed me and they were about to go like all the way almost at some point, but then they didn't because they got interrupted. I forgot to mention that. So you can see she's really in deep with this man. And Baghra's like, don't be a fool. Like, don't be stupid. She calls her foolish little girl because she is really enamored with this man. And she's also lonely and vulnerable. But turns out that the Black Heretic is actually the Darkling. And by him finding this amplifier, not only does it amplify Alina's powers, but it also amplifies his powers. Because they're kind of one and the same, but polar opposites. I don't really know how to explain it, but that's kind of the science behind it. And so Baghra is telling her that if he finds his amplifier, she will become his all-powerful tool. And he does not really actually want to destroy the fold. Because why would he? Why would he destroy something that has made him so valuable to the palace that now they give them primetime treatment? If he gets rid of the fold, what is the point of the Grisha? Why would they exist when there's no magical Volcra to have to fucking destroy? And so you realize that the Darkling this whole entire time has not been actively looking for the way to destroy the fold, but no, fuck that. He actually wants to just have power. He's obsessed with power. And so Baghra, even though she hasn't found the amplifier just yet, Baghra is telling her girl, wake up. This also means that if he finds the fucking amplifier and he uses it on Alina's stuck for lifers, dog. And it's not going to be great for her. So Baghra tells her to leave. Alina finds it so hard to believe, but at the same time, Baghra does convince her that this is the actual truth. And it just breaks Alina's heart that this is the reality, that this guy never truly loved her, at least from what we see, but it was just convenient for him, for them to kind of be into one another. But the reality is that he never had her best intentions at heart. He cared about himself and amplifying his power. And when it does finally hit her, it's very heartbreaking to read, but it is in fact the actual truth. So Alina escapes. So she tries to survive on her own for the few days, but in a series of altercations that are not really that important, she eventually meets Mal. I forgot to mention, at some point when Alina was in the palace, she actually did see Mal. At one point, they did see one another, and Mal was actually very cross. He was very upset, but she didn't really fully understand why. And so he's the first one to find her, of course. And so when they meet each other, it's first of all a little bit awkward because of their last interaction. But turns out, first of all, the Darkling has not found the stag. A. B. Mal and Alina, the reason that their communication was so strained is that Mal, while he was being drafted, he sent Alina letters, but she never responded. But the reason that happened is because Alina's letters and his letters never got posted. Their letters never got posted to one another, and Alina's letters were never posted to him either. They were actually hidden, I think, by Genya. They never got to communicate with one another. So Mal was thinking the whole entire time that she's enjoying this palace life and she's in love with the Darkling and she doesn't really care for him anymore. And then he got super jealous, which made me super upset, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Eventually, after a series of awkwardness, they finally have a discussion, and it's very, very clear that Mal finally realizes that, first of all, he actually does like Alina, A, and that B, this whole time she's been a victim. She's been a victim. You're the victim, sweetie. And so he aims to protect her from here on out. And so they travel across different places to try and make sure that she isn't really seen by anybody. They have frequent discussions. They get closer with one another. They finally have a discussion about what's happening with the Darkling. And at some point, Alina doesn't even want to discuss the Darkling anymore because she sees that it upsets Mal. But basically, Mal confesses that he couldn't sleep because he was constantly thinking about her and that he missed her and he was super hurt by the whole entire situation, even though it's not really her fault. And she, tells him that's not what was happening. I was alone in the palace and I was hurt by the way you acted, Again, these people are young adults, so I always give them grace for lack of communication, but I really don't like Mal in the books. I'm not gonna lie to you, he's not my favorite person right now because he's just so whiny. And at some point when they're together in the mountains after they've been running away for quite a while, he tells her, like, he finally confesses the fact that he sees her. So this is what he says. I missed you every hour. And you know what the worst part was? It caught me completely by surprise. I'd catch myself walking around to find you, not for any reason, just out of habit, because I'd seen something that I wanted to tell you about, or because I wanted to hear your voice. And then I'd realize you weren't there anymore. And every single time, it was like having the wind knocked out of me. I'd risk my life for you. I've walked half the length of Rathka for you. And I do it again and again just to be with you, just to starve with you and to freeze with you and hear you complain about the hard cheese every day. So don't tell me we don't belong together, he said fiercely. He was very close now, and my heart was suddenly hammering in my chest. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you, Alina, but I see you now. And then they kiss. I know I haven't discussed it in extreme length what their kind of relationship was. To me, personally, I mean, I get it now, like he's into her now. But to me, it's just kind of like, did it really have to take her being in the arms of another man, or the perceived arms of another man, for you to realize that she was actually a golden babe before you finally saw her? Maybe I'm just being a little too realistic and I'm just self-inserting myself here a lot, but like that's my personal opinion. I'm just like, So it took her having to be with the perceived darkling for you to finally realize that you were in love with her? Anyways, so eventually, after running away for like quite some amount of time, they finally find the stag. When Alina sees it in person, because their original plan was for her to get the stag like herself, kill it, and then have the amplifier for herself so that she isn't under the control of the darkling, right? So she sees the stag and she recognizes its beauty, because again, it's a beautiful creature. It's a wonderful creature, truth be told. And she looks at it and she's like, oh my God, this is so pretty. I can't kill this thing. And honestly, same. Why would you want to kill a stag? It's done nothing to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a little bit of a break, an intermission. My phone ran out of storage. And before you ask me, Deborah, don't you have a camera? No, I am a student in 2024's economy. So we do it what we can. It's like Alina and Mal find the stag. Darkling shows up. Great. We love to see it. We love to see it. He shows up and completely ruins the moment that Alina is having with the stag. He tries to actively cut or like slay the stag with the cut, but she jumps in like right in between then. So he has to avert the cut into a tree and practically slices another tree in half, wondering what the tree did to him. But you know, that's just my opinion. In conclusion, what happens is that the darkling ends up killing the stag anyway. Instead of using the cut, he just slices the throat of the stag. Alina realizes that she doesn't really have the power to fight the darkling like that. So he does kind of win in the situation. He's surrounded by his corporalki, you know what I'm saying? His soldiers, his people, his backup. They detain Alina and the rest detain Mal. And so the darkling cuts off the antlers, has Ivan cut off the antlers of the stag. And David, our guy over here, is a fabricator. And so what he does is that when the stag's antlers are in the darkling's hands, he places it on Alina's collarbones, and David kind of maneuvers that way into her collarbone. She has a stag as practically her collarbones now, which is kind of freaky. And I remember in the show, when they show what that looked like, that shit really disturbed me and it made me actually throw up. Like, dead ass, I looked at it and I was like, that's disgusting. If that happened to me, no, I'm so sorry. The way it sticks out of her skin, no. So anyways, the darkling drags Alina to the fold. As per usual, because what else is new? You know what I'm saying? And this is just like the season 1 ending, kind of almost similar, where she's on the boat, on the skiff with the darkling and his army and the rest of the Grisha, and they're getting to a point in the fold, and girlie gets smart. And she realizes, after trying to plead with everyone else and trying to use her powers, that no one here is really going to fight for her. Even though that they kind of secretly know that what the Darkling is doing is not okay. They think like, right, like this guy's Grisha, so he's going to fight for the Grisha. So whatever he does, even if it's not going to end the fold, like we're still going to be safe. And that's a common theme that you'll see in the second book as well. But she's like, guys, like this guy is not doing the right thing, but they don't say anything and they stick with him. They really said, that's our man and we going to stick beside him.
This is your man.
Yes,
Look at the screen.
that's mine. And
And
I'm gonna stick beside him.
And so they do that. And so she realizes there's no hope here. So she creates the cut. And what she does is she slices the skiff in half with her and Mal on one side and the rest of the Grisha and everybody else on the other side. Now, the thing is, without Alina being on the other side of the skiff, there is no light to subdue the Fulcra from literally devouring them to pieces. When she separates herself, everybody else is left in darkness. and they die because they get eaten alive by Volcra, besides the Darkling, of course, because he has this saying that like kinders to its own like, or basically like takes to its own like, or something weird like that. Basically trying to say that the Volcra cannot eat him alive because he is like the Volcra. He's practically kin with one of them, so they can't eat him as they don't eat themselves, but they can eat everybody else. And so everybody else dies, and Mal and Alina escape. To where? Well, that's when we move into the second book. Okay, so now we're in book 2, Siege and Storm. Okay. So we start off with Mal and Alina having escaped the series, the events that happened the last time round, right? Now you have to imagine there has to have been some sort of time. The book is not very clear on the timeline as to which time they escaped and lived, but practically they escaped the fold and they end up in this town called, I think, Novozim or Noviazim. I'll put the name up, right? And so they escape to this town after leaving the fold. Definitely, Alina is aware that the Darkling is still alive because I think she can definitely still feel it. Also, she has a lot of nightmares and dreams. So in this town, they try and work for their earnings. You know what I'm saying? Like, Alina does a few jobs here and there, even though she's kind of weak. And one of the reasons that she can't really work as effectively is because she is not able to use her power, because if she uses her power, she'll be declared a sun summoner. And unfortunately, everybody else outside of the Grisha and outside of the little palace are not that kind towards, you know, Grisha type people. I mean, some people do. I love the idea of the sun summoner and worship the idea of the sun summoner, but it's like at the same time, that's just a very risky thing to do. So she can't use her powers, which makes her like physically weak. Like, she does not look okay. She always looks tired. She looks sunken. She looks just done. And girl, like, I get it. I completely understand. Outside of this is kind of like messing with her. She's also having really bad nightmares, so she's not sleeping properly. And besides the fact that everything that she's been through, because the practical trauma of everything Alina has been through is actually insane. They're just trying to live their life. You know what I'm saying? And the objective of them staying in this small town is that they're trying to earn money so that they can go further west away from the Darkling because they know he's still alive. And so we get to a certain day where, remember, Alina still has Mersover's collar. You know what I'm saying? Like, so she still has these antlers like practically sticking out of her neck. So she has to wear a lot of scarves around her neck. And a lot of people think that she's weird because she never lets go of the scarf. And there's one person called Jess who's not even important to the story, but because of the fact that Jess like is friends with Mal in this like little town, he's always looking at Alina and giving her the bombastic side eye. And that's because Mal had to tell him that she has a goiter. Just so that they could stop wondering as to why she's always just clasping her neck. So they're trying to keep things hush-hush and they're going from town to town, basically. Mal is still apparently a hottie. All the washerwomen are trying to get him to come to them because they're a real woman, unlike Alina, which is just, it's wild to me that in this world, you still have shenanigans like that going on. But anyways, but eventually this doesn't really last long because the Grisha do eventually find them and the Darkling pops up and he's like, you thought I was dead? You're not even a fart. I'm sorry. But the difference is that when they come, she realizes that the power that the Darkling has is defo very much different than what it used to be. And that is because he has now employed something called Nichivoya. See, beforehand, the Darkling just had dark power, right? But when they were on the skiff in the previous book, he actually sort of tapped Alina and the amplifier that he has on her, and then he sort of called out her power to give him more power. They became alike. And so her power became his power. His power also technically became her power, but we'll get into that later to the end of this book, right? But by him calling onto her power, he became more powerful. Somehow, some way in the fold, he now becomes more powerful to the point where he can now employ the Nichivoya, which are these dark, demonic looking creatures that can shapeshift, and they're shadow people, and they like, I'm gonna put a photo so you know what I mean. The thing is that you have to remember in this world, if you're gonna create something, because the Darkling's power is not natural, it's not like from the elements like the Grisha have, you know, it's darkness, and that darkness has to come from somewhere. And now that he's employing these like really, really big shadow demons, basically, that power has to come from him. So even though he has this like very, very big army of Nichivoya, my guy looks horrid. The Nichivoya are like eating from him to gain that power. So he's practically just like self-destructing in his own weird way. Like he's actively eating from his own self to create stuff. She notices that this is actively happening, but there's nothing that she can really do about it. And so they capture her and Mal, because what else is new? They drag them into a proper ship. And so what they do is that they get a heart render to slow down Alina's heart, and they practically keep her unconscious for like a week on this boat, so she doesn't know where she is. And when she finally wakes up, we get a whole mini reunion, because tell me why not only the Darkling, but Bagra and Jenya are also on this ship, and Yvonne, and practically everybody that still remained from the last time are still here. So that's great for them. Kind of. They're all alive, and she sees them like she goes in and out. But what's different this time around is that they're on a special ship that belongs to somebody called Sturmhond. Y'all know, anyone who's watched the show, y'all know, but let me explain. So there's this pirate called Sturmhond, and basically him and the Darkling came up with a deal in which the Darkling could use his ship and he could transport them to wherever they needed to go. Stormhund, the pirateer, has his own like crew on the ship as well, and he has a giant, I think, because the book mentions a giant, but like it doesn't really give them a name, but it's a giant. Slay, I guess. Some other apprentice known as Tamar and Tolia, who are my favorite people. I want you guys to know right now, I love Tolia and Tamar. Like, they slay so hard. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Alina, first of all, the first thing that she has to deal with when she wakes up is Jenya. And so Alina is like, man, like, Jenya, what are you doing? Don't you know the Darkling is just doing things for himself and he's not really trying to destroy the fold? And Jenya has this very strange excuse where she's like, but he's doing the best for Grisha because, you know, he's Grisha and he's looking out for the rest of the Grisha. And it's kind of sad for Alina because Alina really believed that her and Jenya were friends. And I do think that Jenya and Alina are friends, but Jenya had more loyalty to the Darkling because, of course, she can't go anywhere else. And this is something that she says to Alina, like, even if the Darkling is kind of bad, they have to stick with him because what else does she have? The king was practically assaulting her and there's nowhere else that they can go. So they only have the Darkling, which gives you an insight to how the Grisha, even though they know that the Darkling's not doing the right thing, they have no choice but to kind of stay with him, which sucks. So when Jenya tells Alina this, Alina is very much heartbroken, but Jenya does not apologize for the fact that she has been helping the Darkling this whole entire time, despite their friendship. Alina asks Jenya about the letters that she used to send to Mal that they didn't get, sent. And Jenya refuses to look at her, but she's like, yeah, I didn't send them because the Darkling thought that it was a better idea for you to leave your old life behind. And Alina is super heartbroken. And I would be too because your best friend was a liar. Like, that's gonna break your heart. Also, one thing I have to note about Jenya is that she is quite vain, because she's a pretty girl. She's a supermodel. She's a star girl, period. Even when she comes into the room this like cabin to see Alina, she looks in the mirror and she's like, I would look better as a blonde. Maybe I should consider going blonde. And I'm like, girl, like, this is not the time. This is not the economy. Like, what's going on? And the whole thing is just super heartbreaking for Alina because she just realizes like part of their friendship was very much a lie. Also, on the other hand, Sturmhond, like I said, is a pirateer who owns the ship and he looks quite strange. He has like a protruding chin and the book says he has muddy green eyes, which I don't really understand what that means. Like, are his eyes just kind of like weird? Like, are they blurred? Like, what's going on, chat? But one thing that's interesting about Sturmhond is that he can see what's happening between the Grisha and Alina. And he can see that the Darkling is actively trying to punish Alina for everything. Because he is not Grisha, he is like, okay, look, I'm not really involved in the situation, but what I won't stand for on my ship is for this girl to be mistreated. Because at one point, the Darkling tries to hurt Alina or tries to threaten her for something, which I'll explain in a second. And he's like, okay, no, I don't stand for that. You will not be skinning her alive. Thank you very much. But outside of that, like, she can't really get much help from him for now. But the reason that they're on this ship is because the Darkling is trying to look for the second amplifier called the Sea Whip. Now again, the amplifiers are rare things and for a long time they've been considered, fairy tales, right? But I mean, they found the stag, so the Darkling thinks it's very possible to find the Sea Whip, so they're going to like another sea. They're not going to Ravka, they're going to like this far off sea to find the Sea Whip so that he can take the power and the other amplifier for himself. Because of course, Grisha, that amplifiers give Grisha more powers, and even though Grisha are supposed to only have one amplifier, my man, the Darkling, don't care. So that's the reason that they're on the ship in the first place. So one of the reasons that Mal is still alive throughout this whole entire ordeal and the Darkling's still keeping him alive is that actually Mal is a very, very good tracker. He was the one who tracked down the stag, basically, because by them tracking down the stag, the Darkling was able to follow them. So he recognizes this, and in this ordeal, he tells Mal that he wants him to find or track down the Sea Whip while they're on the sea, which is a lot. And to make sure that they do this, he threatens to hurt Alina, which is when Stormhund comes in and he says, no, you will not skin her alive day by day to do so, because that's one of his propositions. Now, of course, there seems to be a little bit of discourse because, you know, the Darkling is still quite powerful, but this is Stormhund's ship. So there's a little bit of tension there where he's like, listen, I paid you to go on this ship for us to find the sea whip. So that's that on that period. Like, stay out of this. This ain't your business. That's basically kind of what he says to Stormhund, of course, in better words. So Stormhund, like, keeps quiet, but he's taking note. He's taking note of this, right? Mal agrees to track the sea whip. And so they go over, I think, 1 or 2 or 3 days. This happens all very quickly, but they go over a couple of days to track the sea whip, and Mal successfully tracks it. Now, of course, he has no training into doing this, but he's a very good tracker. So he just naturally feels when there are things around that could be tracked. And so immediately the Darkling is going out to try and like lure it in and to kill it. And in this moment, a few things happen that just turn everything into utter chaos. So as the Darkling is super focused on this, another ship appears out of the blue in this area and ambushes the original ship that everybody else is on. And so instantly, while the sea whip is still there, the other ship comes out in a fury and practically sort of reins in the sea whip by itself. The ambush takes over the original ship that Alina and Mal and everybody else is on. And so Tolia and Tamar immediately grab Mal and Alina and they take them to the other ship because, surprise, surprise, this other ship called the Volkswagen or the Volkswagen or whatever it's called is owned by Stormhund, because Stormhund this whole entire time wasn't interested in letting the Darkling have the sea whip. He just wanted to get to the point where the sea whip was, and he had other ulterior motives, which we'll discuss in a second. And so Tolia and Tamar save Alina from the original ship. And so what they do is that in literally like the quickest seconds you could possibly think of, the original ship that had the Darkling on there, they abandon it in that corner. And so what they're trying to do is that they're trying to actively like use engines on this ship. This Volkswagen ship is very, very advanced compared to the other ships. So it can try and escape as far as possible from the Darkling. And they realize very quickly that because the Darkling is pissed right now, so he's trying to send Nichivoya to hurt people, to take people over. And so the Nichivoya can only go so far. His power does not extend that far over the sea. So the further and further away the ship goes, the further and further away the Nichivoya can attack them, which is great because they've now found one limitation to the Darkling's power. Because they found this limitation to the Darkling's power as well, unfortunately, the people that went to go ambush the original ship, that went to go attack the Darkling, are left on the ship. So that means that Stormhund has left some of his good soldiers fighting the Darkling, and they're obviously going to die because they're not really Grisha. Also, we find out that Tolia and Tamar, in this process of trying to save Alina and Mal, slow down other people's hearts, which means that they are heartrenders as well, and they are also Grisha, which immediately is noted by Alina as to how Stormhund has Grisha in his ranks, in his army on this ship, which is amazing. All in all, they're successful. And they managed to get away from the Darkling. They also managed to get the sea whip, and they manage for Alina to actively sort of stab the sea whip. Now, this process is very interesting because with each amplifier, Alina can sort of feel how the amplifier feels once it's being killed. And she notes that the sea whip has a sort of like song of sadness or sorrow as it dies, which is kind of, I mean, to be so in tuned with animals that you can actively feel when they die is something that's really, really scary. I would be a little bit phased too. They get a fabricator, I think, to sort of take the scales of the sea whip and to turn it into a sort of like bracelet or something that you can wear, that it can be a constant amplifier as well. And of course, the sea whip is very, very valuable. So the rest of the people on the ship take it apart and sell it for different parts, because don't forget, these people are pirateers. Then after all of this, Alina is given that same book that was given to her by the Apparat in the first book that talks about all the different saints. And it turns out the Darkling had that book originally, and he had it taken from her room when she escaped. And in that book, she pages it open to this specific saint called Sankt Ilya, or Saint Ilya, basically, who had the 3 amplifiers: the Firebird, the Sea Whip, and the Stag. And so she realizes, because she always thought that it was like folklore, practically, like the Darkling would tell a lot of the Grisha that the Sancts, basically, or all the saints, it was just like peasant stories. And also, it's an important distinction. There's a difference between Grisha and saints in this world, which is also something I didn't recognize. So apparently the saint like being a saint is something that's religious versus being grisha, which is not religious. So a lot of the grisha separate themselves from the religion and don't really like the idea of having a saint is kind of ridiculous to them because they believe in the small science, which is what they practice practically. And it's so interesting to see. So when Alina receives the book, she sees that there's a third amplifier, which is the Firebird. And so she realizes that perhaps the Darkling actively believes in these saints, and they believe that there's so many other amplifiers that are possible. And so she realizes that the final amplifier that she would need perhaps is in fact the Firebird. But this takes a while for her to realize because she gets very confused at the image. And Sturmhond is the one to hand her this book afterwards. So she's also aware that he might be aware of the fact that there is a third amplifier. All of this is very new information and she's also very confused. But Sturmhond finally explains that he wasn't there to just hunt the sea whip, but he was there in order to take Alina actually to his client. And he doesn't really give them reasons why, and that he hopes that all of this, losing his men, is worth it because she's supposedly the sun summoner. So he doesn't know if they're necessarily enemies or allies because he's a pirateer and pirateers lie. But she's like, okay, this guy has at least got us safe on the ship and the Darkling is gone. So, we take what we can get, period. At the end of the day, with this book that she's now received, Sturmhond tells her to read, about the books, also understand what's going on because she herself doesn't really know that much Grisha history. And as a result, she's also given a bunk room with Tamar, and Mal is given a bunk room with Tolia. So her and Tamar, because they're also staying in the same bunk room, they sort of become slow friends, and I love this for Alina because she needed some friends. She needed some friends after Genya. Tamar is quite different. She's a tom girl. She's a fighter, you know what I'm saying? But it's healthy for Alina because she can see someone who just acts different, who is different, and that she can also be safe around as well because Tamar actively fights and Alina can't really fight like that without her powers. So, it's also quite healthy to see. And so while she's reading about the different saints that have existed throughout history, she realizes that, okay, if this third amplifier is in this book, that means it must be necessary and it must give me some sort of power to be able to defeat the Darkling. So she tells Mal, and she doesn't really want to tell everybody else because that could spell problems for her. So she tells Mal. And this is one of the reasons I do have beef with Mal in this book because he immediately freaks out and he gets a little bit upset for some reason. And he's like, well, you just got the second amplifier and now you want more? And I'm like, my dude, I'm sorry. Are you the sun summoner? Are you the one being hunted by this man? Yeah, I don't think you're in the mood to speak. Thank you. Shut it up. He gets pissed a little bit, which it makes no sense to me. It makes no sense why you're getting pissed. This girl is a young 17-year-old girl who's just trying to figure out what the fuck she's supposed to do. You are not supposed to be getting pissed at this moment. But whatever, he comes around to it and they agree to go find the Firebird and he agrees to go track it. Okay. One thing that is important to note here is the objective of power, because Alina, as she's realizing, okay, these amplifiers, they give her more power, she's also starting to feel the effects of and the corruption of power, basically. And she feels a part of herself wanting more power, which is very unusual for her because she's just practically been a wallflower all her life. She hasn't really had that much attention on her. So this idea of wanting power also kind of freaks her out because she's like, oh my gosh, what if I become another version of the Darkling? Did this person, this Sankt Ilya, also get taken over because of all the power that they had with the amplifier? She's also scared of going over the rule that Grisha should only have one amplifier in their lives, But she also feels herself wanting more power, which will come back later in the story. As she's trying to practically survive this trip, she's thinking to herself that this ship is going back to Os Alta. But another surprise, because surprise, Stormhund had told her that he was going to take her to his client. So the ship is actively not going that way. It's going another way, bestie. And she realizes very, very quickly that they are going towards the fold. They're going towards the fold. Mind you, in between this time of her learning about the Grisha and learning about the saints and them moving towards the fold, there had been quite some good things that had happened. They started to settle down more on the ship. Mal started to become friends with Sturmhond because they both love talking about war and military work. So they are becoming a little bit closer, establishing a sort of friendship. Sturmhond has been goofing around like the goofball that he is, and I actually secretly love him because why is he a joker? And he's so arrogant arrogant, but in not like an annoying way, but in like a goofball way where you know he doesn't really think that. He's just doing the most. So you can imagine that they're starting to build a sort of relationship. She's becoming friends with Tamar. Tolia is becoming friends with Mal, and they're starting to build a good relationship. And she's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't so bad. He takes her towards the fold. Because he knows that she has the second amplifier, he wants to see what the Volcra is like, practically. And it's also on the way to the specific location that he's going to. And so they go in under the fold, right? And when they enter the fold, he tells Alina to shine their light so that they can see the Volcra, right? So what happens is that every time Alina shines her light, the Volcra run away. But if she shuts off her light, the Volcra will obviously attack because they hate the light. What happens is that when she goes in with her light, Stormhan tells her to shut down her light and dim it so that the Volcra could come and then immediately open her light so that they could see how many Volcra is about to surround them and so that they can kill the Volcra. She has no choice, and eventually she does do that. When she shuts off her light and she shuts it on again, you can see literally how the ship is surrounded by hundreds of these demons practically about to just snap up everybody on this damn ship. And she's like, oh my God, everyone is shocked. But you know what? Stormhunt has plans. And so he wants to take out his little like fantasy revenge. And so he starts shooting the Volcra so they're dead. But like, how many Volcra are you gonna kill, dude? Because there's way too fucking many. Like, and also the worst part about this is that when they are getting closer, deeper into the fold and she shines her light, they realize that the Volcra are not only many, but they are also reproducing because there is a nest that they find. So not only are there so many, but they're also constantly creating new Volcra. So like, how many Volcra are you gonna shoot? How many when they're gonna recreate? Like, make it make sense. Obviously, Alina is pissed about this whole entire thing, and so is Mal, and so am I, because what the freak? But Stormhan continues, and so he's like, let's do another round. I'm sure there's more that we could get to. So Alina has to do the exact same thing again, and she has the light on, she shuts it off, and she puts it back on. But then in this moment, the Darkling appears to her. At some point she feels like his sort of hand on her neck, or like there's a knife to her neck, and so she freaks out, but nobody else can see the Darkling, just her. And so it freaks her out, and so she like sort of stops her light because she's obviously traumatized. And as the light goes off, the Volcra come to attack and come snatch everybody back up. They come to snatch again. That will end this video right here because I can already tell this video is going to be like an hour and a half long. That is the cliffhanger we are left on, besties. So in the meantime, I hope y'all stay refreshed. I hope y'all stay well. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know down in the comments below. Subscribe if you made it this far. It really helps the channel. Also, you guys can finally support me if you guys would like, if that's possible for you. You guys can buy me a coffee down in the description below. And my music and everything creative that I do is also down below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'm really excited to get back to part 2 for you guys so you guys can eat up the content like I did, period. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Okay, bye.
Oh my, oh my.
Fashion, baby, it's incredible. You're the best, you know it, babe.